Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today's video is one that's been a fairly long time coming. It's kind of off the back of one I made around January. I think it was January, maybe early February time, about art supplies that I regretted buying, and Graphitint were amongst them. I don't know, I'm trying so hard to love them, but I don't know. Let's see how we go. Today is going to be a bit of a swatching session because a point has been raised about the paint pan set versus the pencils. So we'll swatch them and then we'll try a little sketch and see how far we get. Now the sketch is going to be mixed media because I am a mixed media artist and I don't use anything just sort of pure or properly. I go, you know, a bit off-piste with it, but you seem to like that, so we'll continue. And so today we'll include some neo art, some coloured pencils, maybe some ink, who knows. I never know until I get into it and start. But before we get into all of that, some housekeeping. Welcome to my channel if you're new. Very big welcome. If you're one of my lovely regulars, welcome back. It's lovely to see you. And if you do like this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Helps the channel to be seen and helps to bring art to everybody. And if you like what you see me doing here and want to learn more about mixed media, do consider joining my Patreon. It's a pretty good value for money. For around about €10 you get 3 to 4 videos a week plus all sorts of other things, community, and there's a really quite a strong community growing there actually, and that makes me proud and happy. So yeah, do consider joining us. We would love to see you. Right, into it. Graphitint, Derwent product. This is not sponsored by Derwent. I actually bought all of these, and when I say all, I mean the entire set. I have some more here. That's the rest of the set. The only one I can't find is Graphite Grey, and that makes me feel very suspicious because I think I've probably dropped it or eaten it or something. I've lost it. I can't find it, and I really wanted it because I wanted to take all the pencils and do the appropriate swatch with the pan set. I'm not buying it, even though I have full set syndrome, which is why I think I've lost it rather than not bought it, because I know at one point I will have bought it. I actually bought Ivy Green, which is my favourite colour, 3 times. I've bought Russet twice. No, Chestnut. Sorry, Chestnut twice. I have bought Storm 3 times. As you can see, I'm a pretty hard case, and the reason why this happened is because every time I looked and went shopping on my website that I like to shop on here in Germany, I saw these colours and I was attracted to the same ones, so I bought it again, not realising that I'd already done it. I did realise, I must have realised at some point, and I bought it again, which is really silly because they're not cheap. Nothing is. No artist quality thing is cheap. This is not a slur or even a comment on Derwent. It's just how it is. But that led me to my swatch book, and that's why I actually started my swatch book. And you can see videos on that here as well. So, first of all, I have heard it said a couple of times that the pigment payoff in the pencils is better than the pan set. So I thought we'd swatch them together and see if that's true or not, or what comes up. So let's start with the pencils. How am I going to do this? Let's start with this pencil. This is Autumn Brown, because what I want to do is stay with what's in the pan right here and do the pencils alongside. So I'm just using a round brush, nothing extremely fancy, and I'm wetting that out because that's what these pencils are supposed to do. They are a tinted graphite, but they function similarly to a watercolour pencil. And of course the pan set functions similarly to watercolour. Right, well, certainly in the first one, I can't see very much difference. Russet is the next one along. Pencil, lay a fair bit of pigment down, let's play fair. I love Derwent products, and I was very prepared to love these, but I don't know. I guess the way I see them is it is quite simply just another way to lay down colour. And the way I work doesn't look very similar. Goodness, excuse me for a minute. That just doing a computer update and it decided to start playing at random. So it's not weird. Okay, russet. Yeah, see, to me, that's a very, very different colour. Subtly, so probably not very, very different, but different enough to say that it looks different. This one's meadow. Yeah, so it's another way to deliver a colour to the page. And as a mixed media artist, what I do is I start off usually with wet media, but not always. Increasingly, it has been pan pastel for a sky, for example, because, of course, as a landscape artist, we start with the furthest point back, which is the sky. And yeah, so I sometimes start with dry media, like pan pastel or normal pastels and things like that. But normally I do, historically, I have always started with wet media. So watercolour sometimes, rarely, gouache most of the time, or these sorts of things which fall somewhere in between the two. Not if you're using it in the pan set, then it's quite simply, right, this one's green-grey. It's quite simply dry. It's watercolour to me. That's how I see it very much. These don't have a lot of power in that they do come alive when you put water on them, but they've not got the power of, say, Inktense pencils. And that's fine because they're not Inktense pencils. They are a totally different product. And so far I'm not seeing much evidence, slate green, for the claim that one is stronger than the other. One is slightly different in some cases than the other, but not really stronger. So that's slate green. Let's go and keep it together. I love a lot of dynamic in my work, and I like really, really lovely deep shadows and highlights and things like that. Let's see here. And I've not found that I can get it. This one's ocean blue with these. That is almost certainly down to my technique, I'm sure, because a lot of people love these. I guess this is the whole point with art and art materials. There are some things you're going to love and some things you're just not, and that's absolutely fine. I'm making sure that I wash my brush off very well in between going from one to the other. Also a slightly different colour. We can have a look at this and argue about the differences in a second. Steel blue. I think I can see where the idea about one being better pigment payoff than the other comes in. Quite simply, it is more possible to get a nice, rich effect with the pencil because you can press harder. With the paint pan set, because they're roughly half pan size here, and I'm trying to get in there with my paintbrush, you get what you get. Whereas with the pencils, you can really put your back into it to a certain extent. Dark indigo. So I wonder, does that account for the difference? Because, yeah, and going over them, you can go over the other, of course, as well. But it's not really the same thing. Dark indigo. They all do exactly what you would expect from a quality Derwent product. And, you know, I do expect quality from Derwent. They're not any cheaper than any other art materials. Like I said, there are some many times more cheap and more expensive. But the point is they're a good product. Dark indigo, it's a really nice purpley blue. That is nice. And you expect a certain amount, which you get. There's nothing wrong with the product. I think the fault lies with me. I just can't gel. But I'm trying very hard because I've spent money on them. So I'm sorry that you have to be dragged along with me. You may find it yourself as well. Please do let me know in the comments if you're finding a similar amount of concern with them. That's nice too. It's a beautiful purple. The colours are spot on, just right for landscapes as well as anything else you can think of. That's a bit different. So we'll see how they dry. This one is Juniper, which is misleading. I looked for ages for this one because it's got a grey tip, but it's very much a purpley, heathery colour. And I thought that it was the grey I was looking for, but it isn't. It's this colour. Ever so slight sheen, not huge. Actually, it's quite subtle. It's all very nice, and the colours are so nice. I guess there's not really a yellow. Meadow looks yellow on their swatch. I'll sort of talk about that a little bit in a second. But, yeah, you've got to go several times. So I guess in some colours I can see the point. And this one is Port, which is the last one I have of this lot. But you see, you can really get in there with some colour. It's more difficult here. So maybe that's where it's come from. Port, and finally the Port Swatch, also a slightly different colour. So you could argue if you have the pencils and the pan set, which is exactly how I did argue, you've got a couple of different colours, but the effects are very subtle, so I really wouldn't try that one in court. Okay, while that's drying, the pan, again, Derwent quality. It's really, really nice. The same with the pencils. You can grab hold of them. They're slightly thicker than usual, probably most like, but not quite, the Derwent drawing. So nice and meaty, and this is good quality. You can feel it's good quality. Would be wonderful if one were to venture outside. You can also blend and mix new colours. Of course not. If there's no yellow, it pretends to have a yellow, and I'll show you in a sec. But you can't, you can't mix a primary, so that's got to be there. And there's not really a red either. There are a couple, again, pretending to be red, but they're not really. So mixing would be okay to a point. It comes with this little swatch on something that's slightly translucent, like vellumy sort of stuff. And the swatches are, of course, the same. Half pan sets. You get something to wipe the brush on. You get a brush. Derwent brand water brush, which is great. So nice, actually. But when you look at the colours on the swatches, if I can just pop that on there, again, there's a subtle difference. This looks more red, and it's not. It's really more of a russety brown, autumn brown. It doesn't say it's red, but it looks red to me. This looks more yellow. But either of these would look more yellow, yet one is more maybe ochre, if we're being kind, and definitely green. So the red and yellow make it difficult to mix anything else, really. There are limitations. You can still mix, but there are limitations. As for the claim that the pencils have more strength than the pan, like I said, you can get more pigment down with the pencil. It's just easier. And then, of course, once you've got more pigment on the page and you're trying to dissolve it out, it's going to be easier because you've got more pigment to work with from the get-go. So, I don't know. And, of course, we are completely at liberty. There's literally no law against this, to go over the top again and do things once it's dry. And I say once it's dry because that's a really big thing with mixed media. Quite a lot of people will say, I've heard it a couple of times, oh, look, it doesn't work for me. I've tried putting my coloured pencils over gouache and over watercolour and I get nothing. The trick is, and it's only one trick, it's as simple, it's hardly could be called a trick, is you have to dry the wet layer really, really well. Because especially with good quality paper, it can hold quite a bit of water. So the surface might look or feel dry, but if it feels cool, see that looks dry, it's not smudging, but it feels cool to the touch. It's not dry. And coloured pencils over the top, depending on the brand, depending on the pigment, because you know what it's like. If you've tried this at all, it can go any way at all, depending. But as a general rule, dry it. And I dry both sides of the paper just to make sure. And when it feels warm or room temperature, then it's properly dry. You can see this one's wet. it's obvious, but this one here next to it is cool. All of these are cooler than the paper, so they're not dry. So yeah, like I said, I bought both. I'm not 100% sure that I'm sorry, but I'm not using them. These will probably get donated to a nursing home because I'm sure the elderly there will put a lot more into them and get more out than I do. To me, it is another delivery system of paint to the page to colour the white page so that I can build on it with subsequent layers, which is what I do. If nobody wants them, or if they're not allowed to take them, laws can be funny sometimes, I would use these and use them up and then make a mental note not to buy them again. The additional colours that I've got here that I've bought in multiples, like chestnut, let's just give that a whirl. That's very nice. And ivy is nice as well, because I do like a nice strong green, and that's kind of borderline. I'd prefer it darker. You can mix, like I said, but I just, that's the chestnut one, which falls somewhere in between autumn brown and russet. And ivy is the darkest green that they offer. It's very nice. The difficulty is with mixed media and Graphitint is getting something to layer over the top, because graphite has one fabulous faculty, and that is to lubricate. It's really good for that. It's famously good for that. In fact, like for example, if you've got a metal zipper that sticks on your jeans or anything like that, if you run a normal graphite pencil, just one of your normal pens, any sort of normal drawing pencil, up and down the zip, bit on the back, and then run the zipper pull up and down, it will lubricate that zip and stop it from sticking. So that's a great thing if you've got a sticky zip, because they can be a trial. However, in this setting, it's a bit of a pain because I want to put things over the top, and it makes a bit of a slippery surface, depending on how heavy it is, of course. And again, colours and pigments change everything. Right, I've been playing here. This is as you can see how shiny it is as to what I'm talking about. This shine and so forth is part of its lubrication quality. This is just a made-up landscape, so I'm about to make up another one just to get some colour down and to see what we can do with it. This has got some coloured pencil, and it's got some Neo Art over the top as well, which is the new Caran d'Ache product that everybody's talking about. And so let's get started on a bit of a sketch. We may as well sketch with these. I'm not going... Every time, that annoys me because I'm grabbing for grey. I want grey. I really enjoy sketching, and this is probably where these guys are going to get used. I like a neutral coloured water-soluble pencil to make an initial sketch if I'm going to make one. So what can we have here? Let's go this way with the mountain this time. Maybe a little bit here and just a little bit in the background. And then something in the way here of foliage, and why don't I do another one of those trees so you can see how I did it. Right, there's our sketch. I like drawing my initial sketch if I'm doing one with a water-soluble pencil. Any sort of watercolour pencil would be brilliant for this, because when you go over it then with watercolour or gouache is not really a problem because you can just plough over anything with it. But with watercolour that is effectively translucent at worst and transparent when it's at its best, you can get rid of the marks from your pencils, which is handy. Okay, what are we going to do for a sky? Let's just keep this back out again. This one's storm. So I'm not going to paint the whole sky in. It's not necessary. I'm just going to very lightly colour the horizon slightly. It's one of those skies. I think, one of the powers of watercolour and the media surrounding it is not to feel obliged to colour every space. Right, needs a bit more water than I was prepared to use. But yeah, let's just get that going. And I don't want that hard line, so we can just bring that out a bit. This will be a slightly different feel to the other one. Get rid of those marks and that sort of thing. Now, there are a few unwritten rules with landscapes, and feel free to break any of them because none of these rules matter at the end of the day. What we try to do is you always paint the furthest away point first, which for those of us standing on Earth, if you are in a different situation, do write in and tell me. But for those of us standing on Earth, the furthest point away is the sky. And that doesn't change as far as I know. Cloud grey, found that one. Still not graphite grey. I've probably, like I said, I've lost it. So furthest point away is first, that's the sky. Then we start with some cool colours in quite light colours and light applications, and also light colour values too. I'm giving that a different texture. Like sometimes I'll hold my pencils on the side, and sometimes if I want some of this texture to stay, you can put it in, meaning it a little bit more. I'm also going to bring some of the sky colour in. One of my best tips for making mountains and what have you disappear into the background, whatever medium you're using, is to include some of the sky colour in the mix. And that can either be, if you're mixing paint and working with paint and you've got a blue sky, mix a little bit of blue paint in with what you've got there. Now with this, I'm going to keep that texture as much as possible. So what I'm trying to do is to blur the paints by blending them with some water, but keeping the essential textures as well. You know what's going to happen here. I'm going to like what I'm doing and fall in love with it, because once I've caught feelings for a product, I'll buy the whole thing and then rave about it until it gets lost in a drawer somewhere and I forget. That's happened more times than enough. Meadow next. Let's do a bit of a light meadow, and again, quite sort of light. Don't go too far near the water there. This is all very simple stuff. I'm sure that you are capable of much more than this, but just a simple sketch for those of us who might be new to it. The reason I'm doing this is because I want this to be a little bit more sort of grassy and what have you. So I want a nice uneven line there to work with. I'm going to bring in some of my ivy, which I really quite like, just to increase the depth of colour here. Bearing in mind that I've got the option, and this is why I like being a mixed media artist. I mean, like is a not strong enough word. I love being a mixed media artist because I've got the option of all of these other tools that I can follow up with. Just getting some colour down now. Going in all different directions. That will increase even more in a sec. And what I'm going to do is, I don't want to smudge that, so I'm going to get my heat tool and just dry that. It won't affect anything else. And as I said, both sides. It could buckle a bit. I'm working in a Hahnemühle Nostalgia sketchbook. It's an A6 size, and I love it because it's got lovely smooth paper, which mixed media loves. But it's supposed to be good for mixed media and take anything that gets thrown at it, and by and large it does. But every now and again it buckles, and that's annoying because it'll bounce. So when I heat it, I hold it down until it's dry, a bit like setting hair back in the day. And then I can come back in with my ivy pencil and get started on this tree. Now, this tree is a bit of a conifer, and I sketch most of them in the same way. Just get the bit of the shape of a tree in first. I shouldn't have gone quite as dark behind there, sort of forgetting myself. But we can get rid of all that. It doesn't actually hurt sometimes to see some of the background through the tree. It doesn't make a bad thing. And down here it's very scribbly at this point. And now we can come back and define here and there, like we need some branches and a bit of trunk. Just get some depth in. This is the darkest green. Like I said, you can go slightly darker by adding blue, but it doesn't blend into the green the way I'd like. It's not satisfactory in a lot of ways. So what I'm going to do is just embrace the nature of the mixed media. I'm also going to put a bit of darker here because it's a cloudy sky, so you're not going to get a lot in the way of shade, light and shade on the ground. And then just almost like cursive writing to make some areas of depth here that I can then build into. I can't help thinking that something is needed on this horizon as well. Again, it's just like writing, scribbling, but that's how some of the best art is. It's reasonably loose, not too loose, because I tend to get bogged down in the details, but save that for a bit. That sort of defines the hill, and then of course as you get closer in here, I like a bit of depth. Cover quite a bit of distance. This, as you can see, I've not touched the pan. It's not, let's see how we go. Let's just pop some water onto here, and then I'll see what I can paint over with the pan. Now, I've really sketched the tree. What I'm doing now is softening and moving the pigment around so that it goes to where I need it to be. Sometimes you need a couple of goes. Don't wet it too much, depending on your paper as to how much you're going to get away with anyway. But the idea is you can draw it out on the sides a little bit. Again, it depends how much pigment you've laid down. You're not going to be able to draw this out because there's not enough there. But some of these darker bits you can. But of course you have to be aware that the payoff is you'll lose some then. It'll get lighter. Here again, just let's make this... It's a little bit more tree-like. It's quite vibrant once you add the water, a little bit like the Inktense pencils. Now I'm just using the same colour because it's all water so far to bring this down. Trying to keep a little bit of texture, adding a bit more actually by the direction of brush strokes. Don't want a halo around the tree. You can either bring the meadow into the tree or the tree out to the meadow at this stage. And here in the front, circular strokes. And pick up some of this pigment, get it moving about, but keep shapes happening. Because what we'll do then is have a look at the shapes and see what we can work out as to where other shapes go to make this into a bit of a thicker sort of grassy bit. Right, and that bit there. Right, so got a bit of a background happening. Already I look at this and I'm thinking, yeah, bit meh. It's just, I don't know. I may get over myself eventually, but at the moment it's just not grabbing me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dry that really well, and then we can come back with some more of these pencils to show you that, you know, you can build them up a bit, but there's a limit. There is an absolute limit as to how much you can build them up compared to others, which is, again, it's at times like this I give thanks that I decided to become a mixed media artist, which means that I used to always be frustrated with watercolour because I'd do the watercolour, but there'd be always something missing. And then I went to acrylics and they were fabulous. They were a lot better because I could get much more dynamic into the work, but there's still always something missing and something I wanted to try. So the discovery of mixed media has been an absolute and utter revelation for me. And yeah, maybe it's been the same for you. Let me know. Right, so now before I blow out enough hot air to actually dry this without the heat gun, I shall be back in a minute with this perfectly dry, and we will go on to the next bit. Right, so as I said, we can build more of this up, but you're not going to make it darker and richer. For that, you have to change the colour. And if the colour doesn't exist in the line, that's where I like mixed media. But to begin with, I'm going back in with my storm here into this mountain. And there's another thing. There's no law whatsoever about not sort of blending these out with water. You can just use them as I am right now, and I'm not going to blend those out. I'm going to leave that texture. There's only a little bit on this mountain back here. You can see that, but yeah, it's perfectly possible to leave that. Tell you what else is perfectly possible, and that is to burnish it. And I'm going to use my Derwent Drawing Chinese White, and by going over that, I can fill in some of the gaps with the white. Also blends it back into the background, especially as you go over the edge like I am now. And it makes it look more distant. So there's a few ways you can do it like that. And it's extremely subtle. It's very nice, actually. I'm not going to say much bad about Derwent because I've loved them for a long time. And with good cause. I'm not alone. So if I just show you here, you can go so dark with that. But that's as dark as you can go because that's full saturation of this product. Now, the other thing that happens, now this is something you see in Neo Color 2 as well, the water-soluble one, is wetting it changes the property. So, for example, now that I've done that, if I hold that up to the light and move it around, can you see it catches the light there? Is it actually doing it? Or you might just have to believe me, it's catching the light. It's obviously graphite. When you wet it down, it takes some of that away, which means it's easier to put subsequent colour on the top. And that subsequent colour is really other products is what I'm talking about there. So just give that a bit of a go there. Now, the other thing you can do too is to... I promise this is not a funded video. I funded it myself. You can use your eraser to make marks. These are quite subtle. Here in the trees, you can, once they're dry. So by making the trees very dark to begin with, this is something that I normally do with my Graphitints. So quite subtle there, but obviously where you've got some pigment, you'll see it more. So you can actually make marks in the trees for highlights. That's another way of doing highlights. One thing I particularly like to do is to use this is a Derwent Light Fast in Forest, and it's one of my absolute favourites because you can get quite a dark colour with this and fill in some of the darkness that has disappeared when I wet it. It's also resulting in a bit of shine. But it does make the highlights stand out a bit more. Same here now with this. I could go back in with this one and keep going and so forth. Or I just swap straight to my forest and just put some definition in with that. The sun's coming from this direction, mostly with my paintings it does. It's a particular kink I've got apparently. But just putting some highlights, or rather leaving some highlights and putting some shaded areas on the right-hand side of the tree to make it a little bit more conifer-like. I live in a wonderful national park in the north of Germany, and these sorts of scenes are very much part of that. And these trees are very much part of it. Down here we can go a bit darker. probably, I say this comes out of my imagination, it's probably come out of my experience. Actually, I've seen this particular stand of trees somewhere and am now copying it. Right, so as you can see, this forest pencil, I'm never without this. Honestly, if it got lost, I think I would commit a desperate act. Any of these, if they take this off the market, I will probably riot. You can join me if you like, I'll tell you when. Right, see, that's the drama that I want. I want this light and dark. I don't mind these lighter colours here, so maybe this is how this can work. I don't want to give up on it. I don't want to, even though some of the things that I've bought them because I was being influenced by somebody else. So I would watch a video and think, gee, I like that, I'm going to have that. And I did go out and buy it, and it sits there because it worked for their vision, but it doesn't necessarily fit into mine. But I don't want to give up. I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit here until I can find a way to use it, as my parents might have said. I'm just putting some russet onto the hill just to warm it up a small amount and to help differentiate this so that it's not all exactly the same colour. And I will give that a bit of a blend. Also going to get a clip and put on here, because if it's something that I adore, it's getting tangled in everything. This is bad enough. So just bring some of that over. It just warms it up slightly, so it acts as a glaze. Right, don't need to do any more than that. Let me see if I have got enough here. I think this is my favourite white, but I think it's a little bit too much. I'm going to use ink instead. You shall see that in a second. Now, with this front part here, I would like a little bit more drama in here, and we can start with a second application of ivy. Again, I'm looking for all the areas that are dark already and darkening them up even more. There's not going to be much of a shadow, like I said, because there's no sun. I don't know what this is. It's some sort of greenery. It's quite deep. We have a lot of heathland around here, and the colours are very similar to the north of England. And these, for those of you living outside Britain, these Derwent pencils and colours, anything made by Derwent, fits very much into the beautiful North English landscape of where they are, sort of where they come from. Right, I'm just going to now wet this out, blend it all in a bit. I'm dabbing rather than stroking at the minute. And if you've got some on your on your brush, it's okay to add it elsewhere. Right, let's give that a very small dry. I don't have to dry both sides because there's enough layers under here. Now it's not going into the paper anymore. It's only really with mixed media or anything else you're doing, it's actually only the first layer that deals with the paper. Subsequent layers are going on to the layer underneath it, actually. Right, so let's go with the forest pencil and just, again, I'm looking for dark shapes and places that can be made into sort of wild, untamed bits. This would have been a lot more successful if that back hill had been darker. Then I could have made a nice light bit here, but then you run the risk of having stripy landscapes, which don't always look natural. And that hill's further away, so it's not going to be darker than the foreground. It's another one of those unwritten rules. It's quite quick, quite scratchy. It's as close as I get to loose that people talk about. This one's a Caran d'Ache. green ochre. Just add that in to the mix for texture, and it's going to go into some of the lighter areas. Maybe I could get one that I've already put into one of these where the collar is off that, but it's easier. Now with mixed media, it's a fact that's quite well acknowledged that there's only so much your paper's going to take. It's just not going to keep letting you add layer after layer. Back to Derwent, this one's yellow ochre. And when that happens, I go for a stronger sort of medium. I'm going to put some of this up here actually. All quite random. Into there because you don't want a halo. Yeah, so that's where mixed media comes in. When you've basically done everything you can with a certain mixed media, then you can find another one. And the one I'm loving at the moment, strangely enough, even though I said I wasn't sure, are these Caran d'Ache Neo Pastels. Neo Art, sorry, not Neo Pastels, that's a different thing. Neo Art 6901, and they are basically marry perfectly, except for the yellow one, with the Luminance pencil colours, and they're fabulous to use. And on something like this, they will go over everything else. Very subtle, this one. This one's Primrose. Quite subtle, but the textual marks are there. This one is dark phthalocyanine green. And as you can see, even though you think, all right, well, that's that then, you can't add any more to that, these are really good for it. Because you can deepen this dark bit. You can move them around a little bit with your finger. But they're particularly good where you want it to be very dramatically dark. So you could consider putting some in here if you wanted it any darker. I don't think it needs to be any darker up there. I will go back and forth. This one is olive brown and adds a little bit of a mid-tone green. Sadly, hasn't got a nice green in the range like my beloved. Where is my beloved? Green ochre. That's my favourite one. I'm hoping that if the first round of Neo Art work well in the marketplace, because this is really what it's all about, if they go well, I'm hoping they will then continue to add more to the range. And when they do green ochre, I shall buy 10 of them. You know I will, because I've already done it with the colours of Graphitint. Now, yeah, my dog's decided to chime in because she knows more about this than I do. So for heaven's sake, ignore me and listen to her. Yeah, that. Right, back to dark green again. Yep, Daisy, thank you. Right, a little bit here. Just quite impressionistic, and then you can come back with the Primrose one and just add some where it will do most good. Probably won't use the yellow one, actually. It's getting enough. On such a small picture, you really do not need heaps and heaps and heaps of colours, despite what we think. I'm adding some highlights to the light side of this and also the middle. Again, very, very subtle, which is what you want. And down here, just add some of that. And you keep going until you are happy, or the supplies have run out, whichever one happens first. I promised some inks and dip pens, so let's get those out next. That's simply one of these. And I'm after let's see, none of those. This could take some time. Oh, look, I'm just going to grab the one I had first. This one is Amsterdam acrylic ink in Naples Yellow Red Light, and it's particularly good because it goes quite well with these mid-tones here, the warmer tones, to make some branches and trunks in these distant trees. And the reason I like using this is because it is so fine. There's nothing that I can think of that is as fine as a dip pen. And with the acrylic ink, it means you can get just such lovely sort of dainty trunks and branches, just to give something to this distant edge here. It just needs to be a hint. It's basically a wild landscape, and yeah, this is the edge of a forest before it goes back into being hills and what have you. You can also bring some of it into the front here if you want some finer sorts of things. And again, the ink, the dip pen and the ink, it's wonderful. Considering it's actually operating on an oil slick, we can keep on like that, but we'll be here for the rest of the month. The Neo Arts boast of being both oil and wax at the same time, yet this goes over the top. It's, like I said, very subtle. Subtle's what you want. That's actually what I would want to achieve from here. You could go over the top with other inks. You could go back and bring the other, bring your Graphitints back in again and use them to burnish some of the Neo Arts in, depending on what effect you're after. But the danger is you will overwork. But this is how I personally, I'm going to click that so you can actually see it. This is how I personally would use a Graphitint set. And as you see, I hardly touched the pan set. In fact, I didn't touch it at all. I only used it for, I didn't use it on the sky. I only used it for the swatches. So that was a purchase I probably didn't need to make. And like I said, I'll probably likely to donate these to people who will appreciate them a lot more than I do. Or else use them as a punishment to myself to remind myself in future not to buy things that I don't actually think I'll use. I didn't know it at the time. That's my defense. Let's see if we can, some of this on here. Yeah, we can. Add a little bit of light to that. Sorry, I'm fiddling now. Fiddling only works if you're doing a good job, and the risk of not doing a good job all of a sudden is high, so I'm going to leave that. But anyway, do let me know what you think in the comments, and like I said, if you like the way I work and the sort of things that I do, consider joining my Patreon. And yeah, I can't wait to hear what you think. Do you like Graphitints? Is there anything that you've used, that you've bought, and you've seen somebody else using, you think that's for me, only to find yeah, no, it's not? Let me know, and I shall see you next time. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Bye.